For Saint-Laurent-Cartierville. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The review of the Senate budget should be done in a comprehensive way, not as an attempt to initiate an abolition of the Senate bit a bit, incrementally, as the NDP is trying to do today. We Liberals strongly support in the sound measures that increase frugality, openness and transparency in our parliamentary democracy. An open parliament plan specifically called for more. Our open parliament plan specifically called for more detailed audit of the House of Commons by the Auditor General. It is our strong belief that House and Senate boards of internal economy should work with the Auditor General to develop mandatory performance audits of the House of Commons and Senate administration. The Liberal leader and Member of Papineau rightly said that parliamentarians have the privilege of serving Canadians, and Canadians rightly expect them to adhere to the highest ethical standards. This principle should guide all parliamentarians during a time when we really need to improve ethical standards in the House as well as in the Senate. The Senate in particular needs to change. Not only is change needed to their rules around transparency and accountability processes, but the whole institution cannot stay the same. The status quo is unacceptable. Three bold options to reform the Canadian Senate are on the table: abolish it, make it an elected body, or make it more independent and less partisan. Only the third option, proposed by Liberal leader the Member of Papineau, is the realistic option. The other two don't stand a chance. Why? Because abolition or an elected Senate would both require constitutional amendments as confirmed by the Supreme Court in its April 25, 2014 opinion. The court ruled that Parliament cannot change the nature of the Senate unilaterally. Making it an elected chamber would require the agreement of Parliament and the concurrence of 7 provinces representing 50% of the population of the provinces, the 750 rule. Abolishing the Senate would require the unanimous agreement of Parliament and the 10 provinces. Unanimity among provinces for abolition is out of reach. No more is there the majority concurrence required for making the Senate an elected chamber. At least one province, Quebec, has declared that it will not enter into constitutional negotiations on the sole issue of Senate reform. And there is the Regional Veto Act, which gives veto power over constitutional changes to the 5 regions of Canada. To abolish would require a referendum, constitutional negotiations, and very likely a majority in every province of this country. So this will not happen. Cela dit, les Canadiens...
That said, Canadians are fed up with ethical and financial scandals caused by the actions of certain senators. Canadians want no more patronage and excessive partisanship, which stains the Senate's reputation by reducing its usefulness, and the patronage and partisanship have been pushed to unparalleled and intolerable extremes by Mr. Harper. We Liberals agree that reform is required to make the Senate fulfill the role it was destined for, that of chamber of sober second thought. We commit to doing everything possible to make the Senate do a better job of fulfilling the role the Fathers of Confederation intended for it, that is, to scrutinize bills, find flaws, shortcomings, errors, and vagueness, and propose useful amendments. Like John A. Macdonald, we believe the Senate must be an independent house, having free action of its own, for it's only valuable as being a regulatory body, calmly considering the legislation initiated by the popular branch, but will never set itself in opposition against the deliberate and understood wishes of the people. We want to see the Senate play its constitutional role, an upper chamber that meets the aspirations of the regions and minorities in all their diversity, including First Nations and official languages community. We Liberals believe in a Senate that is not motivated by partisanship, that will be more serene and independent and populated with lawmakers of high quality, competence, ethics, and skills, chosen through a nonpartisan procedure. A more independent Senate. That's the challenge Liberal leader Justin Trudeau has committed to take on. The Liberal plan has two parts. First is already a reality. That's the second time the member has used a family name. The first time it was the current Prime Minister, and the second time it was the leader of the third party. So you've done it twice. I don't want that to happen again. It's been done twice. You may continue, the honourable member.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I did not realize that at all.
Thus, senators will be freed up of all partisan tasks and will be able to focus better on their senatorial tasks. The Prime Minister was invited by the Liberal leader to do the same with his own caucus, but unfortunately he refused. So we have a Liberal caucus with no senators in it, and senators with no partisan obligations. In a quick and decisive move, the Liberal leader created the most important Senate reform since Confederation. In one morning, he did more for the Senate than the Prime Minister did in almost 10 years in office. And the Liberal leader will go even further with reforms if Canadians elect him as their next Prime Minister. The second part of the Liberal reform to the Senate calls for a non-partisan appointments process through which the upper chamber will be made up of eminent lawmakers, highly dedicated and qualified. Some constitutional experts recommend the creation of a Senate Advisory Council. It would have the role of giving the Prime Minister informed and objective opinions about possible candidates for the Senate. In my view, this deserves consideration. This model would be based on serious, objective, non-partisan criteria. In order to be recommended, a candidate would have to have a long list of skills, exceptional competence in their field, links with the indisputable links with the province in question, a record of service to the community, outstanding work record, honesty and upstandingness, open-mindedness, wisdom, judgment, all the kinds of things we expect from a lawmaker, a perfect understanding of what the Chamber of Sober Second Thought's role is, the ability to propose amendments to bills without usurping the role of the elected chamber. The Council should take care to have fair representation of women and minorities, including First Nations and official languages communities. That's a possible model that I have just described to you. Under constitutional conventions, the Prime Minister would make the final recommendation to the Governor-General from a pre-selection list prepared by the Advisory Council. If the Prime Minister felt unable to appoint someone from that list, he should have to explain to Parliament and ask the Advisory Council to prepare a new list.
Such a selection process would be fully constitutional. It would not change the Senate's fundamental nature and role, a nature and role that, according to the 2014 Supreme Court Opinion Section 52, Parliament has no right to alter unilaterally. In contrast, the Court confirmed that making the Senate an elected chamber would fundamentally alter its nature and role, thus requiring that the 750 provincial approval threshold be met. The court noted in Section 65 of its 2014 opinion that the framers of the Constitution Act 1982 extended the constitutional protection provided by the general amending procedure to the entire process by which senators are selected. That means that the entire process must be considered in order to assess if it changes or not the fundamental nature and role of the Senate. If the entire process only aims to make the Prime Minister's choices less partisan and more objective, as the Liberal proposal does, it does nothing to change the fundamental nature of the institution. To the contrary, it reinforces the likelihood that the Senate will actually correspond with the Court's definition of the upper house's fundamental nature. That definition reads as follows: to provide sober second thought of the legislation adopted by the popular representatives of the House of Commons, to be a thoroughly independent body which could canvass dispassionately the measures of the House of Commons, and a completely legislative body rather than a perennial rival of the House of Commons in the legislative process, removed from a partisan political arena. That being said, I believe it would be wise to experiment with the new process before entrenching it an act of Parliament in order to test its uptake. Pour conclure,
in closing, allow me to say that the commitment made by our leader, the commitment to give Canada an upper chamber that is more effective, less partisan, and more independent is realistic and necessary. Without having to change one word of the Constitution, it would give us a Senate with senators who are skilled, knowledgeable, and with the abilities that would allow them to carry out the task entrusted to them by the Fathers of the Federation to scrutinize and enhance bills from the House of Commons.
C'est la troisième fois.
Order. This is the third time.
Order. À l'ordre.
Order.
La députée de Saint-Laurent-Cartierville peut continuer.
The member for Saint-Laurent-Cartierville can continue.
now I realize my mistake. No, because before I did not realize that. Le plan libéral pour la réforme.
The Liberal plan for Senate reform will give us a Senate that is worthy of the pride and trust of Canadians, a true House, or rather a true chamber of sober second thought. It is time to go forward boldly. It is time to put in place an effective and nonpartisan Senate thanks to the Senate plan, or rather the Liberal plan for Senate reform. Questions?